Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. What's the creepiest experience you have ever had? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. This was about 3 years ago. My older brother had been in college in San Jose, California for a couple of years now, and would come home every summer. During this time, I took the initiative to work on my health and would run every day, every morning. I would run this small trail on the end of an orchard that was private property. People run in the area often, but I was the only one who would run along their fence and eventually got permission from them to run within the fence, but not into the orchard. As such, I would run from my house, make a right from the end of my block, and keep going 3 miles down until I reach an intersection and run back. One night a few weeks before my brother was set to come back from college, I had a nightmare. This part may be a little unsettling, so I'm giving a warning. The nightmare, as I remember it vividly even to this day, starts with me going on a run on my normal trail, but during the afternoon instead of the early morning. I ran down to where I got to the fence, crossed it, and ran along the edge of the orchards. Then, as I ran, I saw people I didn't recognize within the orchards. A group of big bearded men with ragged clothing were whipping a group of people in the orchards. I was horrified, but stopped as soon as one of the big men turned and saw me. He whistled with his 2 fingers, and from behind the group of tortured black people stood a large black man who had been mutilated from the torture, who then began to charge at me with blinding speed and an unimaginable amount of rage and pain that I had ever seen in a human being's face. I had already been winded from the run, but I caught a second wind from adrenaline and sprinted back out from the orchards. But as the man ran out from the orchard with almost supernatural speed, he caught me, pushing me to the dirt, and screamed a blood-curdling scream that would eventually wake me up. I was terrified, but shrugged it off. Weeks go by, and I could still vividly remember the nightmare, which is irregular for me, as I normally never remember any of my dreams. My brother came back from college, and we spent a couple of days with the family, and one day he asked me if there was anywhere nearby to go looking for bugs. He was taking an environmental class that had him observing certain insects and bugs, and wondered what he could find here in a more rural area compared to the Bay Area he had now grown familiar with. I instantly thought about my running trail and simultaneously remembered my nightmare. He thought it was hilarious and jokingly accused me of being a racist. I swear I'm not. We got a good laugh and decided to walk down that trail to look for bugs for his class. I led the way and watched him explore and talk more and more about bugs and his college life. We got to the point in the trail where we walked past the fence and were walking on the edge of the orchards. He wasn't satisfied with the exploration, so I offered to go a little further and go right on the trail, which would lead to a small patch I had never gone on in my many years of running. That was between the private property and the light field of dead grass that led to the road. We made it to the patch and started walking, where he found more and more bugs. So good for him. He and I then remembered my nightmare that I had just shared with him hours before, and then stopped walking as we noticed a large tree that had branches outstretched so far that they went over the small creek of water next to the patch and the orchards, which was about the width of 2 two-lane roads, so pretty large branches. On one of those branches was a long, incredibly old, and definitely used piece of rope that had been tied in a noose just above our heads. It swayed in the wind, brown and frizzy from weathering and use. It was there and it was real, as we both saw, and we could move it as we threw sticks at it to make sure we weren't just seeing it. We nervously laughed, but openly agreed that we wouldn't walk much further after that and should head back soon. After passing the tree and finding a good spot with a log where my brother found tons of bugs, we decided to go back. We both openly agreed to be on the lookout for the tree with the noose as we walked our way back. We had talked and remained calm the whole day and the whole way down, and remained alert the whole time. It wasn't until we had walked a few meters past the same tree that we realized something was off. My same tree that we realized, my brother immediately noticed that we missed the noose. We turned back to look at the tree again, and like we suspected, the noose was no longer on the tree. In that moment, I had a chill go down my spine. No sign of the rope on the ground, in the creek, in the orchard, or anywhere. My brother, who is normally calm and pretty brave and brash in moments of danger, immediately said we should start walking out of the patch. Not long after we start walking, we speed walk, then jog, then went into a full-blown sprint out of the patch. I was a few feet ahead of my brother and had halted so he could catch up, and as soon as I looked past him into the patch, I couldn't help but look past him into the patch and feel an unimaginable fear that I could only immediately compare to that of the level of fear in my nightmare a few weeks prior. As soon as we made it out of the patch and back to the fence, we hopped the fence, crossed the street, and made our way back home. We laughed at ourselves along the way, but we both every now and then talk about that day and can never figure out what day and what happened. I stopped running down this trail since that day and slowly began running on my school track instead. I was about 6 and it was the late 90s. Think small, poor town in the Northeast. We were poor as well then, and we lived with my grandparents and great-grandmother in the family home. I slept in a room facing the backyard, my grandparents across the hall, and my parents downstairs. When I woke up this one night, there was a light flashing throughout the entire house, red and green, alternating back and forth like when a power truck or a cop car is out front of the house at night. Between both needing to pee and being a curious child, I woke up and went to the bathroom. The bathroom faced the road, and that was where the light was coming from. I climbed up on the heater to get a good look out the window. That's when I saw this thing. The light was level with the second-story window and was on a ring. The thing had a shape almost like a Beyblade or battle top, and the lights were on the flat part of the top, with the pointed part being in the center of the road. The lights were only about 10 feet or so from the house, and the house is 40 feet back from the road. Once I got a look at it, the terror set in, and I bolted for my grandparents' room. My mother apparently watched it from the living room for a while, and Dad saw it too, though we only got him to admit it like last year. The terror I will never forget. There was only one other time I felt that, and that was also a UFO. It's like when you're camping and you see a big bear on the other side of the clearing, except more intense. I worked at a car factory in Detroit. This was the early to mid-80s. I was in my early 20s. I worked on the assembly line. Some car parts were short, and so production had to end early that night until more parts arrived the next morning. We were sent home early around 11 p.m. Our shift actually usually ended at 1:30 a.m. I and some buddies decided to meet up at the local bar, have a couple of beers and burgers, and shoot some pool before they closed at 2 a.m. The bar was in the local neighborhood, which is a very old part of Detroit. I made my way to my car and proceeded down a neighborhood street lined with large old homes on my way to the corner bar. The street has houses from the 1930s or older that are close together. The older streets are narrow, and there's barely room for a car to navigate down the street. Very cramped. On my way to the bar, traveling around 30 to 35 miles per hour, a middle-aged man of about 55 years of age shoots out into the street in a hurried walk. He popped out 2 feet in front of me from in between the parked cars. He gave me absolutely zero chance of hitting my brakes before I might hit him. The streets are cramped, and I had nowhere to go to avoid hitting him. He turned his head toward me, and we shot a look of surprise at each other. I shut my eyes and slamming it on the brakes, knowing I could do nothing but hit him. One thing I always remember was he held a full suit on, with a hat, but he was wearing the wrong time era clothes. His clothes were dusty too. Go and Google Depression era suits, and you'll see what he was wearing. Not only were his clothes way out of date, but I also found it strange that he was wearing a full suit with a hat at 11:30 p.m. on a weeknight. He bolted in front of my bumper. I shut my eyes, slammed on the brakes, and quickly came to a stop. I know I had just hit him, but I decided to see if his body is in front of my car. I jumped out of my car and didn't see him in front of me, under any cars around me, or under my car. I didn't feel an impact, and my foot bumper was clean. I even went and checked the sidewalls on both sides of the street. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Figured, if nothing else, I would have had a hat lying around somewhere. I pulled my car forward to see if a body would come from underneath it. Nothing. I read the next day's newspaper to see if there was any story related to a hit and run. Nothing. I was awake, alert, and oriented when this happened. I know what I saw. As I think back on this, I wonder if I saw a real ghost. I just don't know exactly what happened that night. I worked at a movie theater in a mall that was built in the early 80s, maybe even late 70s. When it was built, there was a body found on the premises that had never been identified. The place was super creepy, and there were a lot of things that happened there. But one of the creepiest was an experience I had in the booth. The projection booth was probably the most haunted part of the building. One night, I was starting a movie which involved threading the projector. I was focusing on getting it done quickly since I was a little late starting, and I heard a male voice call my name from somewhere on the opposite end of the booth. I yelled back in response, "Yeah?" because I wasn't looking in that direction. No one responded. I finished starting the movie and walked out from between the projection and yelled, "Hello, yeah," but I didn't see anyone. I went back downstairs and walked up to the 2 male ushers and asked them what they wanted. They said they hadn't been in the booth and had no idea what I was talking about. The door to the booth is locked, and the only people with keys were me and other female manager. The other manager was in the office, and there was no one else there that night. There was a ton of things that happened there, but this is the only one that comes to mind as I don't really have an explanation for it. Moved into my brother and friend's finished basement/laundry room. There were no windows at all, so it would be pitch black at night except for the glow of my alarm clock. It was literally at least 10 to 15 degrees colder than the rest of the house. I often slept with the covers over my head because if not, my nose would get cold enough to wake me up. On one such night, I woke up and felt like someone was in the room. I looked in the corner and saw my brother slowly walking back from the washer-dryer with his arms stretched out, trying to find his way in the dark. I thought maybe he was checking the dryer for something he was going to wear in the morning, but as I became more awake and my eyes adjusted to what little light there was, I focused on him a little more and realized it wasn't my brother. The figure was taller, skinnier. He had a much thicker, stubbly beard than my brother could grow. He wasn't trying to find his way in the dark. He was walking straight towards me, staring at me and reaching for me. My heart almost jumped out of my chest as I involuntarily shot up into a sitting position, about to sprint out of bed, and I yelled, "What the f-?" But he had disappeared. I tried to convince myself I was just seeing things, waking from a dream in poor lighting, but the feeling never left me. I went up and slept on the couch that night and every other night until I moved out. So my family and I used to live in Okinawa, Japan, because my dad was stationed there, Air Force. For a while, we stayed in an apartment complex before officially moving into our home on Kadena Air Force Base. I was really young, probably around 5 or 6 years old at the time, and I would have a lot of bad nightmares. I can't remember what they were about since it was so long ago, but they were frequent enough to worry my mom. She would even place a small plate of salt on my windowsill. I knew it was to try and help with the nightmares, but I'm not entirely sure where that practice comes from. So this pretty much goes on for the duration of us living in Okinawa in general, and once we moved away, nightmares became less frequent. Still had nightmares like everyone else though, but that's normal, I think. Years later, we eventually came back to visit some family for a while, and when we did, bam, I had the worst nightmare I've ever had to this day. Thinking about it still gives me a really sinking feeling. I'll try and describe it as best I can. In my dream, I was this young boy who would often play with his best friend. I remember feeling very intimidated by my father in the dream, not my real father. This was someone else who didn't like my best friend for some reason. The dream somehow progresses. I don't remember the details, and I'm walking into a big tent set in front of the house. Inside, I saw my father slicing my best friend's head like you would like a hunk of meat in a deli. What really disturbed me was how the cleaver didn't cut clean either. Like he had to really struggle to cut through, and it just was absolutely awful. I woke up and couldn't sleep the rest of the night, and struggled to sleep the next few nights afterwards. Now, it could totally be just the fact that I was young, and maybe there's a statistic that says children are more prone to nightmares than adults. Who knows, honestly. But I'm willing to believe that there could have been a possible paranormal aspect to all of this. Anyone who knows a little bit about Okinawa history will tell you that this island has seen a lot of hard times, and it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to say there could be an abundance of restless spirits hanging around. Add that to the fact that earlier this year, my mom and I were chatting about this, and my mom told me that there was an old family tomb just near our old apartment. I spent 6 months on Okinawa. I was at Camp Schwab, but I was over at Kadena a few times as well, thanks to a couple of Air Force girls. But we would mostly hang out at Gate 2 Street. If you've been stationed over there, you have definitely been to Gate 2 Street. Fun town, beautiful country. I didn't know what Okinawa would look like until I actually got there. It was like a Pacific tropical island. I mean, you had translucent water at the coastline, some islands you can swim to. You know, built and, industrial for sure, but the beaches were really nice. So anyway, hope you guys are having a great day. I was working a summer job at Pier 1 Imports, after which I never want to see Wicker again in my life, but I digress. I'm working the register, and it's a slow day as usual, with only a couple of customers browsing the store. Then in walk two people, a woman and 20-something guy. Both are thin, both have long black hair, both have skin about as white as paper, and both are dressed all in black. The woman is in a flowing dress, and the guy is in black jeans and a black button-down shirt. They begin browsing the candle aisle, sort of passing their open palms slowly back and forth in front of the candles and whispering to each other. I was kind of getting weirded out because it was nowhere near Halloween, in the middle of August. Between ringing out customers, I noticed they are keeping up their routine up and down a few more aisles. Eventually, they came up to the register with a few large black candles and black candle pillars. After bagging their purchase and ringing them up, they pay in cash, and their change is exactly $6.66. As they leave the store, I print a copy of their receipt and head back to the manager's office. I tell her what happened and show her the receipt. Oh yeah, that was the local witch and her apprentice. They come in here all the time. I'll bet you'll have to restock the black candles, am I right? My house is 3 stories high, and my dad, being paranoid, has cameras all throughout the house and outside, and I have 3 siblings. I and my older brother sleep on the top floor, and my sister sleeps on the second floor, so naturally whenever I hear a noise while I'm sleeping, I shrug it off and blame my siblings, right? Wrong. I've been afraid of any peep or bang I've ever heard in the night, so obviously, when I hear a blood-curdling scream from the kitchen, I'm scared shitless. My older brother was at work. He worked from 5 to 12 this night, so I think it's my little sister effing around. So immediately my fear has faded into sheer rage for what I had thought she had done. I shouldn't have been that paused at a scream, but being siblings, I found any way to get pissed at them. I stomped down the stairs, ready to give her a piece of my mind. When I go downstairs, I see nothing. I had thought she ran into her room and was fake sleeping, so I stomped in there and found her bed empty. I would later find out she had gone to a friend's for a sleepover. I did not know this, so I walked around her room trying to find her before I heard a pair of feet scurry across the floor behind me. I twirled around to see what I can only assume to be, well, a ghost. I remember being a 5'8" kid. I felt so tiny compared to this pitch-black entity, and as soon as I blinked it was gone. I ran out of my sister's room, up the stairs and into mine. I ran into my bed and hid under the covers. I eventually fell asleep. In the morning I told my father about the experience, and he said he would check the cameras in the house. This is what we saw. When I heard the scream, I ran out of my room, and as I ran out of my room, the same black figure I'd seen appeared in my closet. The rest of the cameras showed it following me, right? Behind my back. I moved out of the house for college 4 months later, and I would never sleep over at that house again. So back in 2020, I was really weighed down mentally because of school. My grades were low, I didn't understand any of the assignments, and my teachers would never respond to my emails on time. Overall, I was wondering if I even wanted to live anymore. Then I started seeing things. There's no true way to describe them, but I'm sure that I was seeing demons in broad daylight. One day I'm just trying to relax in my room for a minute, when all of a sudden, I hear someone whisper my name in my left ear as clear as day, just out of the blue. I jumped and spun around to see nothing. I just wrote this off as being paranoid and went back to the important task of staring off in space as my mind was screaming, "Why aren't you worried?" But I decided that if it was time for me to go, I'll go. Then, as I'm just staring at the wall, I see a shadow behind me. Of course, my only instinct is to turn around and see who is behind me. Once again, I see nothing. Now I'm spooked. I decide that I'm just tired and should go to sleep. So I get up and make my way downstairs to get a drink and some melatonin. I go through this routine every night, so it's nothing new, but this time I feel like I was being watched. I am, of course, aware of this and feel creeped out. Nonetheless, I finish up and go back upstairs. I end up being able to fall asleep and sleep until about 11 o'clock in the morning. This was during lockdown, so I wasn't worried about being late for anything. So, I go about my daily routine and nothing odd really happens for a while. Then one day the same thing happens. I feel like I'm being watched, see shadows, hear whispers, etc. This time, however, I actually see the thing. Of course, I saw it through my closet door, but here's the thing. The only reason that I noticed it was because the closet door started to slide open on its own. I'm not sure exactly how to describe it, but I'll try my best. The first thing I noticed was how tall the thing was, which was around 6 to 7 feet tall. The second thing I noticed was its dark, beady eyes. They looked more like a void than regular black, with pure white pupils that were too small to be considered natural. On top of all that, it looked extremely skinny and had very pale skin. Just as suddenly as I saw it, it jerked its head back into my closet with inhuman speed. Since I was home alone at the time, I wasn't frickin' around, so I grabbed my CO2 gun that can shoot a 10-gram bullet 1,700 feet per second and unloaded a 10-round magazine into the closet door. I reloaded and hesitantly approached the closet and threw the door open to see, yep, you guessed it, nothing. I understandably decided to sleep on the couch that night. There were 4 more entities that I saw during the rest of the year, one of which I still see sometimes. The one that I still see occasionally, I have named the Rift, because it looks like a duster of floating glass needles. I will only see it when I'm about to fall asleep, and it will always be on my ceiling. Usually it will crawl across my room, on my ceiling, all the way to my bed, and then proceed to crawl down on my wall at me. I do my best to ignore it, but I can't help but lose sleep some nights because I don't know what it is or why it only bothers me. I'm a night owl because nighttime is usually when I'm the most productive. I procrastinate a lot, so I use the night to catch up with schoolwork. A couple of weeks ago, around 2 a.m., I started hearing a weird animal noise coming from downstairs. I have 2 cats, so it's possible that they just got in a fight with each other, but it sounded different from what my cats usually do. It was raspier than my cats and had slight hints of a female voice in it. Again, I might have just been sleep deprived and was hearing my cats fight, but it scared the shit out of me. Last week I heard screaming outside my window that actually lasted quite a while. This time, it sounded a bit more natural. Imagine someone hyperventilating and screaming at every exhale. So, it could have been someone messing around outside. I live in a small village, so we don't have any meth heads walking around or anything though. Now, I've recently noticed that there's sometimes a rhythmic tapping sound coming from the bathroom window that hangs over the sink. Our bathroom has an inclined roof. That kind of fades away after a while. I don't have the guts to look up and see if it's just the house settling or if someone or something is actually tapping at the glass, and I probably won't ever try to look at it.